Welcome once again. I want to take you back to about 2002, maybe the very early 2000s period. It had been since 1996 since the Bretonnians had a battle tome. At least that's what we always called it. War journal, armies, whatever you want to call it. That's what we called it. Then this book came around and brought us back. This was also part of the 96. Well, you could call it a codex. Battle tome is what I always like to call them. This is part of that artwork from it. And we get this nice little section that talks about the Bretonnians. We get the lance formation with a diagram. And all these. Now, do you want to take a guess when they got their army update? Now, I had to check this to be sure, but from 96, it took them to 2003. So a year after this book came out, that's when it came. Now, of course, the amount of time between this book releasing and that is not as long as you think, but it's also one of those situations where you go, oh my gosh, it has been quite the time for the Bretonnians. And there's a lot in here talking about them. We got a Bretonnian Duke on a griffin. That's one of those glorious goblin green square bases. Lady's Blessings with a nice little art right in there. It was an interesting time. Get some magic items, magic banners, and we're not going to show all of these, but you get some core unit rules. You get a Damsel of the Lady Choosing Troops section, which is a nice little section, actually. And quite an interesting time. But it was an interesting period, as I pull this out and put it aside, if you were a fan of Britons. The Arthurian group that they had some changes to their lore. They went from being relatively close to the Empire with an uncaring bureaucracy and leadership within the nobles to being a little bit different. Now, I might have gotten that in reverse, but blah, 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 blah. Let's look at this heavy metal showcase. Let's get some of that heavy metal. Ooh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. Look at that glory right there. I'm still quite fond of this miniature right here. But I do like this one of him getting ready to give the good old Warhammer to the orc. Fantastic Green Knight. Another example of the lance pattern. And this beautiful jousting little section right here. With all the scrolling in the background and knights. They were such a wonderful little faction and really quite interesting in what they offered people. And it is interesting to see just how quickly they were discarded. And it was mostly because, let's be perfectly honest, when we look at these guys, we can all say, well, that's very Arthurian. It's very much what you would expect from, well, Arthurian stuff. You could get these kind of models all kinds of places, and that was very true. Very, very true. Now, I would say they have some unique Warhammer elements to it, but let's not give Games Workshop more credit, more than they are due. They were more than eager to throw things in the trash the second they didn't deem them to be perfectly protectable, especially when they started moving towards more IP-able things. If it was easier to put into the IP bank, it was more likely to stay. And honestly, the Bretonnians, they fell to this trap, especially if we're talking about how they were treated with Age of Sigmar stuff, and so on and so on. But they are a fantastic little group. But much like many different armies within the Warhammer Fantasy battle times, there were a ton of armies that went a very long time between codexes. Vampire counts are an interesting one. They have both long periods and short periods of time. It's very bizarre in that regard. But it was a fun time seeing this. And honestly, I think it gives you kind of a snapshot of an earlier time. A time of big change as the company was moving through both hardships, a element in which it was having more and more trouble introducing newer people to it, and where they made good steps towards the future, and then it led them into making far more greedy ones. But it was definitely a time where things like this were starting to become and going out of vogue with especially Games Workshop as a company. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, but boy did they charge me for it. But hey, if you guys have any experience as a Bretonnian player, let us know in the thing. As a person who admired them but never got to collect them, I would love to hear how you guys felt, how it went for you. I can only talk in retrospect towards really an army that, much like the Tomb Kings, were very quickly pushed towards a forgetting, a removing, and are only now kind of getting a resurgence with, I believe, the Tomb Kings showing back up in, oh Lord, the new version of Warhammer Fantasy. Not to besmirch it, but you know what I'm saying. I can't remember the name of it. But if you have any thoughts or opinions, Bretonnian special rules, let's end with the Bretonnian special rules. Thoughts or opinions, but it was an interesting period of time. And this book is basically like a time capsule. It holds a awkward teenage time for the game, for the company, and definitely is one in which many things would change, many things would never be what they were when I started, and will never be again. But hey, let me know what you guys think, and if we never meet again, I hope you have a fantastic day, a fantastic life, and hey, remember at the end of the day, these are just the opinions of a nobody. Bye-bye.